Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have Denver, the city of Colorado, giving out bug out bags for quote unquote preparedness month. Russia continuing to escalate the situation, saying that they can and will, not bluffing, use nuclear weapons, and an absolute massacre in stocks this week, thanks to the central bank of the United States. Let's get started. Ironically, Russia was up over 16%, the stock market in Russia, while the rest of the world literally just collapsed. This is due to the central bank of the United States raising the interest rates again, and also not just raising them, but also providing guidance that they're going to raise even more in the future. So as I've mentioned to you guys before in other videos, interest rates literally are what kind of impulse, let's say, the economy, where if they raise the interest rates, it's more expensive for you to buy houses, right? The real estate market in the United States is 17% on average of the overall economy, more expensive for you to buy stuff on your credit cards, more expensive for everything. And so that number is really important. So when they threaten, you know, I think politically they say they give the guidelines. That obviously affects a lot what people think. If people think that the cost of things are going to continue to increase because we've already been nailed by the whole situation with inflation, right? People are going to start to spend less. And remember that consumer spending is the absolute majority for the vast majority of economies around the world. In the United States, for example, it's almost 70%, 70. So that absolutely spooked everybody. Overall, this week, markets were definitely super negative, including Canada in the West here, US, Canada, they're over 4 or 5%. In quarter two, because of the situation with the interest rates, there was $23 trillion that was vaporized in wealth. Most wealth lost in a quarter after having 2 consecutive quarters of wealth loss, which is quarter one, quarter two of this year. As I mentioned to you guys before, the Fed announced on Wednesday that they were going to increase the rates 0.75 or 75 points, basically basis points. So now the average is between about 3.25. And they also mentioned, as I mentioned, the large increases in a new projection. Now, there's another dichotomy that's going on here as well, where the world economy is not in a good place, but the US dollar is kind of the least dirty shirt in the closet. And one of the things that happens, especially when central banks increase the interest rates, and one of the things that we have to think of institutionally, people think that the stock market is risky, quote unquote, because it's a variable interest rate. You're not for sure going to get a return on your investment. Whereas if you invest in government bonds, that's a quote unquote more secure investment because they're going to supposedly always going to pay you. So that's another situation that we have, and especially why the market's going down, because now with the interest rates going up so high, people get their money out of the stock market and start to put them in bonds. With that demand for the dollar, and because of the fear that's in the market, the dollar value explodes. Now the dollar's at a 20-year high, right? Against the euro, I think the euro got down to about 98 cents or so against the dollar. Even the pound went down 2.6% on Friday. You know, UK is not in a very good situation right now, but the pound from the UK went down to 1.08, and it hasn't been this low since 1985. So 95, 2005, almost 30 years. We're looking at about 23-ish years. Did the math on the top of my head, and that's when it fell to $1.04. So if you want to buy some property, you want to invest, it might be time to look at Europe and the UK. I don't think this is going to last for a long while because the US is not in a very good situation. The reason why we are having this inflation situation is because all the money that we printed since 2008, and now with the weaponization of the dollar against Russia, we have a lot more people that are not using the dollar in their reserves. They're using bilateral agreements where they use their own currencies. And if you didn't know how that worked, basically, if you wanted to buy oil, which powers the world, the US made an agreement with Saudi Arabia that people just had to buy it in dollars. Well, now Russia is selling their oil in rupees to India, in rubles, and also yuan, which is the Chinese currency, to China. And in 2000, 70% of the global reserves were in dollars, whereas now it's about 59%. So we're literally eroding our trust. We're eroding the custom of everybody using dollars around the world. And as fast as it's going up right now, I have a feeling that when it starts to turn, it's going to come down just as fast because people just don't trust, let's say, the US economy anymore. Overseas market news, global stocks hit a 2-year low on Friday. Euro markets, a big time low, like everything just is a bloodbath. I think I'm going to put that picture of all the red stock market with Jerome Powell taking a selfie. I think I'm gonna put that as the as the picture for the video. Now, Russia did go up over 16%. They're doing great because obviously everybody's buying their natural gas and oil and everything. Latin America mostly lower. The Bovespa in Brazil was up over 2%. Africa and the Middle East mostly lower as well. South Africa taking the biggest loser crown there. And then in the far East, mostly lower, but we had Philippines with the biggest loser there at 4.62%. A lot of news in the Bitcoin space outside of the fact that it's been coming down. It's probably going to continue to go down a little bit, especially with the strength of the dollar, right? Once there's less confidence in the dollar, then people will start coming back to Bitcoin and Ethereum and those things. 23-year-old Aiden Platursky, which was a self-described crypto king of Canada, is being investigated because he took all this money, millions of dollars from people, and he had, McLarens and Lamborghinis and everything. And now everything is going to bankruptcy, and he's starting to find out that he's not really a good hedge fund manager because he was just spending the money that people was giving him. Colorado becomes the first state to accept Bitcoin as payment for taxes. And Bank of Russia has officially legalized crypto for cross-border payments. If you guys remember, I think it was about, a year and a half ago, if I remember correctly, Russia was actually thinking about banning cryptos. So now they're the black swan of the whole world. They need a little bit of help getting they're laundering some of that money. India is seeking to phase implementation of a digital rupee, which is a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, which is what I always told you guys that it was going to happen in the end, which I call very kindly government coin. One world government, communism for all, yay. During the fiscal year, meaning that they want to implement that this year. And Bitcoin overall lower for the week, down 4.45% at just a touch under 20,000. I think if I look at the numbers now, I think it actually got down to 18,000 now. But I do a call off on Saturday, so down over almost 60% for 2022 and over 55% for the last 12 months. Commodities: the energy minister in Spain said on Thursday that a new gas pipeline has been increased and can now be used if needed. It was originally being planned to be activated on November 1st, but obviously they're running into a crisis because winter is coming and they have no way to heat their homes without Russian gas. Brazilians' coffee bean supply hit a record low as global security worsens. So now we not only have problems with the supply chains, we even have problems with other things like coffee. And soon, by the way, I got my own coffee farm. You guys want some coffee? I'll hook you up. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be a rice shortage as well. India now, which was accounted for 40% of the global rice trade, they exported more rice than the next 4 countries combined. Now starting to put restrictions on rice in addition to taxes for the exports. So that's going to cause a big problem as well. There's more than 150 countries that rely on India for their rice. And oil for the week, because of the situation with the economy and also Putin, super volatile overall for the week. U.S. crude went down over 3%. Brent was down over 2%. They settled at 82.52 for the U.S., 89.45 for the Brent, which is international. And gold and silver taking an absolute smashing. Dollar hit a fresh 20-year high. So obviously all the commodities, everything that's listed in dollars is going to go down in value if the dollar strengthens. Gold went down 1.91%. It's at a 2-year low, 1,645, while silver went down over 4% to 1893. Most of you guys know that I mostly swing trade silver and silver miners. Now would be the time to have a look. I'm not a trading advisor. I can't tell you what to buy, what to sell, what to look at, but do your own research. Take a look at the silver miners. Moscow World Standard. This is super interesting because if you guys didn't know, the West essentially had a monopoly on the pricing of gold and silver. And it's basically based in New York and in London. And there's a lot of manipulation in these markets because obviously they don't want people to rely on gold and silver, which historically has always been money, instead of the dollar, which is just basically a piece of paper that's not backed by anything. And the only reason why it's worth anything is because the government mandates you to use it. So now Russia is planning a Moscow world standard, which could potentially stop the manipulation because the prices aren't going to be set by New York and London anymore. And they're even thinking about connecting them to either BRICS currencies. BRICS are the group of nations including Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, or creating a new reserve currency that's based on the commodities. So if we go back to what's called the gold standard, where basically you can change a certain amount of gold or silver for a certain amount of money, right? Let's call them, I don't know, Asian dollars, whatever they're going to call them, right? That could be the beginning of the end for the dollar because now they're not going to be able to manipulate it anymore. And in my opinion, silver should probably be about $30, $40 right now. Remember that solar power, solar panels, they need silver. Batteries need silver. Even the back of mirrors use silver. So silver has a huge industrial application. That's part of the reason why I'm making that big bet on silver because I see a huge upside. Financial and banking news. Inflation in the United States is costing the average American family over $11,000 this year. Yay. Germany inflation is surging. It's now at 8.8%. The August producer prices for Germany, remember that Germany is the third largest exporter in the world. They went up over 45% for producer prices in industrial products. Energy prices doubled from 1 month to the next. They're up over 139% from the same period last year. And even consumer prices are rising at their fastest pace in the last 8 years. So we literally have the fourth largest economy in the world, third largest exporter, and a whole pile of trouble. Central banks around the world are continuing to raise their interest rates. In addition to the US, on Thursday, the Swiss National Bank raised their rates by 0.5%. Inflation in Switzerland is the highest in 3 decades. While Singapore headline inflation as well, much higher than a year ago. It's rising at its fastest pace in 2008. So it's not only a US problem, it's a world problem, even though I think that the root of the problem is the US. Remember that the amount of dollars that we use, there's been 40% more dollars created since the pandemic than existed before the pandemic. So poof, they just created money. And that's why we're seeing this huge increase. But it's not only during the pandemic, and this is why I don't like to get too political when I talk about these things, because both sides, both left and right, are to blame. Bush did it, Obama did it, Trump did it, and now Biden's doing it. And every single one of them did it more than the last. So we're just walking into an economic crisis right now. Political news, the EU Commission check this out. The European Union Commission is threatening a sovereign country of Italy on the eve of an election because the quote unquote extreme right might win. And Brussels is saying that they have quote unquote tools if the wrong parties win. So if you think corruption was bad in the US, check out Europe. The DHS, which is the Department of Homeland Security, is confirming that Venezuela is emptying its prisons and sending violent criminals to the southern border. Remember that Biden, a delegate from the administration, went to beg them for oil instead of, getting oil from a friendly neighbor like Canada. Corporate news, Beyond Meat. This is hilarious. But Beyond Meat COO arrested for biting a man's nose in Razorback Stadium. So it looks like that fake meat, it wasn't really that tasty, so he had to get a piece of real meat and took off a guy's nose. U.S. travel stocks and airline stocks took a hit on Thursday. This is due to the fact that people are starting to notice that if we have a recession, people are going to travel less, people are going to buy less stuff. So obviously travel is one of those things that people are definitely going to spend less money on if they need to save money. Porsche shares are setting to begin trading on September 29th. If you didn't know, Porsche is technically a private company owned by Volkswagen, which is one of the largest car makers in the world. They're set to try to raise $19.5 billion for Volkswagen, and that puts the valuation of Porsche at about $78 billion. They're selling 25% of the company. And a startup called Boom, which is creating supersonic jets. United Airlines and also American Airlines are making deals to buy these jets. Can you imagine just hopping on a jet in New York, getting to Paris in about an hour or two, having lunch, having some croissants? the Eiffel Paris, and then flying back the same day. That'd be awesome, isn't it? We have another situation where Tesla's recalling, well, Elon Musk said on Twitter that he's not technically recalling these vehicles, but he's doing an update to fix the problem, something about going in reverse. In technology, SpaceX is they conducted a demo with the private jet operator JSX, 30,000 feet in the air. They got 100 meg download internet. So it looks like SpaceX is going to do extremely well, just like every single one of Elon Musk's other companies. In trade news, good news on the shortage of food situation. An organization overseeing the export of the grains from Ukraine, which is a joint committee, which is the Ukraine, Russia, United Nations, and Turkey, are allowing 9 more boats to leave Ukraine with grains, which is a good thing because that's going to put a little bit less pressure on the worldwide food market. And in investment news, the U.S. housing market slowed for the 7th straight month in August. Longest stretch of declining sales since 2007. And obviously this is due to the situation with the mortgage rates, because obviously a house right now could be worth the same when it sells, let's say, but the actual monthly payment has almost doubled in price due to the fact that the interest rates have almost doubled. So obviously if people can't afford to buy their homes, then it's going to bring down a lot of pressure on prices. And then also we have a situation where we have a ton of people that refinance their homes and bought homes with interest rates at 4%, 3%, sometimes 2%, and those people are definitely not going to sell when they have the super low monthly payments. UK's media regulation Ofcom said on Thursday that they're going to investigate the dominance of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. They own 81% of the revenue of the online cloud market. And in international events this week, Hurricane Fiona hit Puerto Rico and also Dominican Republic. It's up in Canada now, and we have another hurricane that's on the way. Governor DeSantis in Florida announced a state of emergency because it looks like it's going to be a big one. So hopefully you guys are preparing yourselves. Wednesday, Putin announced a partial military mobilization. He's going to call up 300,000 more troops for the war in Ukraine. He also made a warning that he wasn't bluffing about using nuclear weapons and that all his weapons can be used to defend the new territories that he took in Ukraine. So this is continuing to escalate. I don't talk about it every week because it's like, unless there's something extraordinary that happens, we kind of know there's a war. Unfortunately, it's not good for anybody, but what are you going to do? Numerous draft age Russians are trying to leave the international borders on Thursday since they don't agree with the war. And then in Uganda, there's 7 new cases of Ebola. And if you didn't know, Ebola is 1,000,000 times worse than the pandemic virus that starts with a C. Don't want to say it because I don't want them to mark my channel and take it down. But 7 other deaths are being investigated as well. And that could be a potential outbreak, which is not a good thing because Ebola doesn't have a cure and it has a super high mortality rate. And an unusual fact, as I mentioned in the beginning, Denver is giving away their free bug out bags. I didn't have too many conspiracies this week, but I thought it was unusual because Denver, if you didn't know, is the second office. It's kind of like the backup office for the government in the United States. And they're giving out these bug out bags for National Preparedness Month. How convenient. That's the news for this week, guys. Remember, the preppers were right. Hope you're preparing yourself. We'll see you next week.